Gentlemen, without a doubt you have heard the young Mozart. You have seen with astonishment a 9-year-old who plays the piano like the great masters. You have heard with greater astonishment the testimony of trustworthy persons that he played excellently when he was 3 years old. You will recognize that everything he plays is his own composition, and that all his pieces, including his improvisations, show power, which is the telltale mark of genius. This musician received at his birth such a precise and fine ear that false tones, or those which are too heavy, cause tears to spring to his eyes. This still very young child is quite natural and utterly charming. He has extraordinary knowledge of music, but if he were not a musician, he would probably be a very ordinary child. His heart is as sensitive as his ear.
Welcome. Welcome. Try again. Welcome. Welcome. Good evening. We are the Live Music Project. We have all heard the stories of Mozart as a child, of how he traveled throughout Europe with his father and sister Nano. She was also a wonderful musician on the harpsichord, and brother and sister would play much music together, playing in various concerts and aristocratic houses. Tonight, we're not going to focus about his time as a child, his wonderful prodigy he was. Instead, we're going to skip ahead to the life he came to know very well, and that of a freelance musician, which consisted of much traveling and looking for jobs and money. Back in Salzburg, he and his father were employed by the Prince Archbishop Colloredo, but according to his letters, Wolfgang was frustrated with the provincialism of Salzburg and wanted independence from the small area where he was born. He longed to go to bigger places to seek his fortune. Back then, you needed permission to take leave of your employer, or you could end up in jail, as Bach spent some time in jail about a generation before for not showing up to work. In the last half of the 18th century, when Mozart was alive, the position of court musician or court composer was at the level of a cook or a page boy, a mere servant to the crown. The following letter is a request for leave from the Archbishop, both on his behalf and that of his sister. Colloredo must have been annoyed by the continuous requests by his servant Mozart, and there was much tension between them.
Your princely grace, you will graciously permit that I ask your highness submissively for my discharge from service. I owe it to my father, who has untiringly given all his time for my musical education, to be thankful to him with all my strength, to ease his financial burden, and to take care of myself as well as my sister. It would be a pity for her to have spent so many hours at the harpsichord without making good use of it. I commend myself to the highest favor and goodwill of your princely grace, most gracious ruler and lord, in greatest humility and obedience, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Once he received that permission, there were many important decisions to be made, not least of all, where to go, to where his composing and performing would be best received. Mozart spent time in a few cities such as Paris, Vienna, Milan, Munich, and Prague. This letter is from Mannheim.
One of the reasons that I'm not going to Paris is this. There's really not much I can do for a living there except to find some students, but I'm not well suited for that kind of work. I want to leave this to people who can only play the piano. I am a composer. I must not and cannot bury my gift for composing. I may say so without arrogance, for I'm aware of it now more than ever before. I would indeed bury it if I had a lot of students, for it is a very hectic business. I would rather neglect the piano than composition, for piano is essentially a sideline for me, but thank God it is a very strong sideline.
We would like to welcome Igor Lashinsky to play the Ninth Piano Concerto with us, E flat major.
Mozart to his father, when Mozart was 22 years old. I have very sad and distressing news to give you. Dear mother is very ill. She has been bled, as in the past, and it was very necessary too. She felt quite well afterwards, but a few days later she complained of shivering and feverishness. As she got worse, Baron Grimm sent us his doctor, but she is still very weak and feverish and delirious. They give me hope, but I have not much. For a long time now, I've been hovering all day and night between hope and fear. But I have resigned myself wholly to the will of God and trust that you and my dear sister will do the same. Let us hope, but not too much. Farewell then, dearest Papa. Take care of your health for my sake. I kiss your hands 1,000 times and embrace my sister with all my heart. The next letter is to his friend Abbe Bullinger in Salzburg. It was sent out at the same time and with the inscription at the top, "For you alone." Mourn with me, my friend. I am writing this at 2 o'clock in the morning. I have to tell you that my mother, my dear mother, is no more. She was quite unconscious at the time of her death. Her life flickered out like a candle. All I ask of you at present is to act the part of a true friend by preparing my father very gently for this sad news. I have written to him by this same post, but only to say that she is seriously ill, and shall now wait for his answer and be guided by it. I beg you, therefore, my most beloved friend, watch over my father for me, and try to give him courage so that when he hears the worst, he may not take it too hard. Go to them at once, I implore you, but do not tell them yet that she is dead. Just prepare them for it. Watch over my dear father and dear sister for me. The next letter is again for his father, 6 days later. I hope that you are now prepared to hear with fortitude the saddest and most painful story. My last letter will have told you that no good news could be hoped for. On that very same day, at 21 minutes past 10 at night, my mother fell asleep peacefully in the Lord. Indeed, when I wrote to you, she was already dead. I hope that you and my dear sister will forgive me for that very necessary deception, for as I judge from my own grief and sorrow what yours would be, I could not bring myself suddenly to shock you with this dreadful news. Weep as you cannot fail to do so. But take comfort at last, for how much happier is she now than we are. Indeed, I wished at that moment to depart with her. She is not lost to us forever. We shall see her again. We shall live together far more happily and blissfully than ever in this world. desire to write opera again. It would make me so very happy because it gives me something to compose, which is my real joy and passion. Whenever I hear people talk about opera, whenever I'm in the theater and just hear the tuning of the instruments, I get so excited, I'm totally beside myself.
The rarely performed Idomeneo was written in 1781 and was one of his crowning achievements. He pushed the form of traditional serious opera with his dark, often dissonant work. He and the librettist corresponded through Leopold, Mozart's father. These letters offer great insight into Mozart's creative process. The letters from this period tell us of a composer who is not just interested in the music, but also in the text and the way they interact. He seems to have a grasp of stage production, and he crafts all of these elements to tell a story with a maximum amount of drama and emotion. This opera is based on the ancient Greek story of Idomeneo, king of Crete, whose life is in danger after a terrible shipwreck. He vows to the gods that if he is saved from this peril, he will slay the first man he meets on shore. True to the cruel irony of Greek tragedy, the first man he meets is his son, Idamante, and much intrigue follows. The aria you're about to hear is of the character Electra, who is in love with young Idamante, but he loves another. Throughout the opera, she fights for him and schemes to win his love, but loses in the end, resulting in her bitter aria, in which she welcomes death and the tortures of hell. While we tune, I invite you to take a look in your programs at the text. There's some fantastic words. Tear out my heart, you horned serpents, or a sword shall end my pain. the live music project. We'll have a chance to have a question and answer at the end of the show. And we'd also like to invite you to a reception hosted by the Quick Center, and you can get a chance to chat with us and have a glass of wine. Lovely. Here are a few things that other composers have said about Mozart through the years. Oh, there's one more thing. We said we wouldn't talk about the prodigy stuff anymore, but it's interesting to note that this piece was composed when he was 8 years old.
He roused my admiration when I was young. He caused me to despair when I reached maturity. He is now the comfort of my old age. Proceeding. The most tremendous genius raised Mozart above all masters, in all centuries, and in all the arts. I should be only too happy to renounce all my virtues in exchange for Mozart's sins. Mendelssohn. If we cannot write with the beauty of Mozart, let us at least try to write with his purity. Brahms. Mozart encompasses the entire domain of musical creation, but I've only got the keyboard in my poor head. Chopin. When Mahler was on his deathbed, he is said to have cried out, "Mozart," and then died. We shall never be able to do anything like that. Beethoven, to a fellow musician while listening to Mozart's C minor piano concerto. Mozart is sunshine. Dvorak. Before Mozart, all ambition turns to despair. Gounod. A world that has produced a Mozart is a world worth saving. What a picture of a better world you have given us, Mozart. Schubert. I tell you before God, and as an honest man, that your son is the greatest composer known to me. Haydn, in a letter to Leopold Mozart. This boy will consign us all to oblivion. Johann Hasse, a now unheard of composer. Mozart's father. You tell me that you are to write an opera. Take my advice then, and remember that your whole reputation hangs on your first piece. Listen before you write, and study the national taste. Hear and witness their operas. I know you, and I know you can imitate anything. Do not write in haste. No man of sense does. Voltaire reads his poems to his friends, listens to their opinions, and alters accordingly. If you write anything for publication, make it popular and easy for amateurs. Do not write in a hurry. Strike out what does not satisfy you. Do nothing for nothing, and see that you get paid for all.
Although Mozart doesn't answer this advice directly, he makes an obvious reference to it in his next letter to his father, while talking about a possible job he is being offered, but doesn't seem very excited.
The position carries with it 2,000 livres a year, and the condition is that I spend 6 months each year at Versailles. I don't think I shall accept, but I have yet to hear my friend's advice on the subject.
His father never gave up offering advice to his son, and here gives some notes on dealing with musicians during opera rehearsal.
You should do your best to keep the whole orchestra in good humor. Flatter them and keep them all liking you. For I know your style of composition. It requires unusually close attention from the players of every type of instrument, and to keep them all alert and hard-working for 3 hours is no joke. Everyone, Even the lowliest viola player may be deeply stirred by personal praise, while a little courtesy of this kind only costs you a word or two. However, you know all this yourself. I'm just mentioning it.
For the opera, The Marriage of Figaro, let's just imagine at the time what it was like. We all know Mozart's music and some of his operas, but the musicians at the first rehearsal had not heard it. No one had. This was the first time the music was placed in front of them, and indeed the first time that all the parts had been put together. There were, of course, separate vocal rehearsals, but this was the first time they had a full rehearsal with full orchestral forces. During the rehearsal of Marriage of Figaro, one of those first rehearsals is described by the Irish tenor Michael Kelly, who played the first Don Basilio. Leopold need not have worried about the musicians, for the music seems to have spoken for itself.
I remember the first rehearsal, the full band. Mozart was on stage with his crimson jacket and gold-laced cocked hat, giving the time of the music to the orchestra. The effect was electricity itself, for the whole of the performers on the stage and those in the orchestra, as if actuated by one feeling of delight, vociferated, "Bravo, bravo, maestro! Viva, viva grande Mozart!" Those in the orchestra, I thought, would never have ceased applauding by beating the bows of their violins against the music desks. The little man acknowledged by repeated obeisances his thanks for the distinguished mark of enthusiastic applause bestowed upon him.
The Marriage of Figaro was the time of Mozart's greatest commercial success. In The Marriage of Figaro, he took the words of a comic opera and elevated them to the highest of musical and emotional experiences. Here is an aria showing the despair of a woman whose husband's eyes have wandered. In the hands of another composer, it might have been merely a song of sorrow, but somehow from Mozart's pen comes love, pain, longing, and even hope.
Oh
take commissions for pieces he would rather not write, and was always scrambling to get one or another piece done.
To his father. Herr de Jean, who is leaving tomorrow, paid me only 96 gulden because I don't have more than the 2 flute concertos and the 3 quartets ready for him. Even for just giving me only half the sum, he was still short 4 gulden. The fact that I could not finish the assignment can be easily explained. I never have a quiet hour around here. I cannot compose except at night, which means I also can't get up in the morning. Of course, I could scribble all day long and scribble as fast as I can. Such a composition goes out into the world, and I don't want to be ashamed to have my name on the title page. Besides that, my mind gets easily dulled when I have to write a lot for an instrument I can't stand. As a diversion, I write something else, such as a duet for piano and violin.
In Mozart's honor, we have omitted flutes from tonight's program and play instead what he wrote as a diversion for himself.
From Mozart to his wife, Constanze. Dearest, best, and most precious little wife of mine, I was overcome with joy when I received your letter of the 13th. The Queen wanted to hear me play on Tuesday, but I don't think much will come of it. My dearest little wife, when I return, you'll have to be content with seeing me rather than money. I kiss you 1,000,000 times and am forever your faithful husband. From Mozart to his friend, Michael Kuchberg. Oh God, the situation I'm in, I would not wish on my worst enemy. If you, my best friend, forsake me, I will be lost, together with my poor sick wife and child, blameless though I am. I had wished to pour out my heart to you last time I was at your house, but I didn't have the heart to do it. I would not have the courage even now if I didn't know that you know me so well, know about my circumstances, and are completely convinced that this distressing situation is not my fault. Oh God, instead of thanking you, I come to you with new requests. Instead of paying you back, I come asking for more. If you could see into my heart, you know how anguished I am about this. It's now up to you, my one and only friend, whether you will or can lend me another 500 gulden. I would suggest that until my affairs are settled, I'll pay you back 10 gulden a month. Then, as matters turn around in a couple of months, return the whole sum to you with whatever interest you wish to charge. Forever, your most deeply obliged servant, true friend, and brother. Postscript. Oh God, I can hardly make up my mind to send this letter, but I must. If it weren't for this illness, I wouldn't be forced to be so shameless before my one and only friend. Yet I hope for your forgiveness. Adieu. Forgive me, for God's sake, do forgive me. Adieu. To a music publisher from Mozart's father. I have been wishing for a long time that you would print some of my son's compositions. Surely you will not judge him by the piano sonatas which he wrote as a child. I should like very much for you to see my son's style of composition, but far be it from me to persuade you of anything. The idea, however, has occurred to me because I see works by others printed which really arouse my pity. To Mozart, from a publisher in Leipzig. Write in a more popular style, or I can neither print nor pay for anything of yours. Mozart's response? Fine. I'll earn nothing more, go hungry, and the devil if I care. From a friend of the Mozart family, Baron Friedrich Grimm, to Mozart's father. He is too sincere, not active enough on his own behalf, too susceptible to illusions, too little aware of the means of achieving success. Here, in order to succeed, one must be artful, enterprising, and bold. For the sake of his fortune, I wish Wolfgang had half as much talent and twice as much of the qualities I have described. You may see, my dear sir, that in a country where all the mediocre musicians have immense fortunes, your son could not manage at all.
On and on his life went like this. Toward the end of his days, Mozart got a commission to write dances for entertainment, which, though gave him a good amount of money for not much work, was perhaps not the most rewarding of victories, judging from the inscription he had.
Zu viel für das, was ich leiste, zu wenig für das, was ich leisten könnte. Too much for that which I accomplish, too little for that which I could accomplish. account of Mozart's last day by Sophie Heibel, Constanze's sister. I hurried along to Mozart's house as fast as I could. How frightened I was when my sister, who was almost despairing and yet trying to stay calm, came out to me saying, "Thank God you have come, dear Sophie. Last night he was so ill that I thought he would not be alive this morning. Do stay with me today, for if he has another bad turn, he will pass away tonight. Go into him for a little while and see how he is." I tried to control myself and went to his bedside. He immediately called me to him and said, "Ah, dear Sophie, how glad I am that you have come. You must stay tonight and see me die." I tried hard to persuade him to the contrary, but to all my attempts he only replied, "Why, I already have the taste of death on my tongue. And if you do not stay, who will look after my dear Constanza when I am gone?" Later, Sussmayer, his assistant, was at Mozart's bedside. The well-known Requiem lay on the quilt, and Mozart was explaining to him how he ought to finish it when he was gone. A long search was made for Dr. Closet, who was found at the theatre, but wouldn't leave till the end of the play. He came and ordered cold poultices to be placed on Mozart's burning head, which affected him to such an extent that he became unconscious and remained so until he died. His last movement was an attempt to express with his mouth the drum passages in the Requiem. That I can still hear. Words fail me to describe how his devoted wife, in her utter misery, threw herself on her knees and implored God for his aid. She simply could not tear herself away from Mozart, however much I begged her to do so. Another account, as told by Benedict Schack, a family friend. On the very eve of his death, Mozart had the score of the Requiem brought to his bed, and he himself sang the alto part and we sang the other parts. When we got to the first bars of the Lacrimosa, Mozart began to weep bitterly and laid the score to the side. From Mozart to his father. I have made myself so familiar with death, so that his image holds nothing frightening for me anymore, but much that is calming and comforting. I never go to bed without considering that, as young as I am, I may not see the next morning. For this, I thank my Creator every day, and wish it to every one of my fellow men, from the bottom of my heart.
additional, we have a small question and answer if you'd like to invite Igor and Josiah and Daniel.
Any questions?
This is over there, Daniel Smith, Artistic Director of Blood. Yes, sir.
Please top off the piano on purpose.
We just lost it. It is so, well, one reason it was, the way we had to place it, tough to have been setting the sound back over there instead of here. If it's up, it's not directional. With this room, it works pretty well with that.
Through the letters or any other correspondence, was there any indication of what Mozart's favorite piece was? Or among his favorites?
There was a couple, at certain different points, a couple times he said, to my mind, this is my best piece. One was a piano and woodwind quintet. And there's a couple others. He would sometimes say things. I mean, when he one other thing he was supposed to have said right as he was dying was, "I would like to have heard my Figaro one more time." So there's a couple little bits. He never, he didn't at the end of his days say this is a piece, but there's little bits. Yes.
How old was he?
35.
Let's go over the back there and then we'll take over. Yes. It was difficult to, because there's so much good stuff. It was very difficult for us at the beginning when we organized the show. Daniel and I sat down and think, well, what we want to highlight, what we need to get in there, what genres. We definitely need to get opera in there. We definitely need to get piano concerto in there. We wanted to make something that is familiar and something that you may not have heard before, like contradances. And we came up with a beginning, which was the G minor symphony, which is a great dramatic opener, and we had to end with the Requiem. We had to. There was no other way we could have ended this. Yes?
Which opera was most well received by the public?
I think Figaro, and then that was the most popular, and then they commissioned him to write Don Juan.
Yeah.
Who commissioned Magic Flute?
Magic Flute was, it's like kind of an opera company / theater company, a guy named Mendel Schickeneter, who played one of the parts in it. He had it commissioned, and he was a friend of Mozart's, and Mozart worked on some of the projects. There's a lot of other operas for people who like his operas. He was looking at an intriguing thing. He was looking at some. There were some drafts going over for possibly writing an opera of Faust. And Goethe always said that Mozart should have written it. So there were some things in the works that we wish would have happened.
How many instruments did Mozart play?
It's unknown, but he really loved to play the viola.
And that's by way of apology for the viola joke earlier.
But he was very adept at the organ. He would, for anyone who knows any music stuff, him and Bach were the only people I've heard of that could improvise double fugues on the organ, which is a pretty big, weirdo mathematical thing. But he was big on that. He was viola, violin.
Was this the first time you were paying this to the public?
Yes, first time. Daniel and I came up with the concept for this piece, but we have such terrific musicians on stage, and we have such terrific soloists, and Josiah was just terrific to fit in with the impetus maybe, but I get all of the energy back from these folks. Yes.
That's what I wanted to you all play so beautifully. Is this an ongoing group?
We're pretty much the same regular members. We have some new, some old, some more old. We try to keep the same group together as much as we can, but you know, just like most other freelance musicians, we're all pretty busy, so it sometimes doesn't work out. But I think we have a good time. I had a good time. I don't know if everybody else. I had a good time.
What is the average age of?
17. 25. It's about 25.
Are you booked to perform this again now?
This show, no, but we hope to take this on the road.
Have you brought your checkbook?
We could do it, but
This is our second season, and we're still getting on our feet as far as becoming non-profit and all that stuff. The Twix Center would be wonderful. Give us a home, give us publicity. But we pay for this ourselves, right? We hope not to continue to do that. But, these people are wonderful, and they're playing for a lot less than their work. You know, it's 3 or 4 times more than we're paying. And yes, sir.
We're getting paid. If I could just make a comment at this point, because you're noticing that there's probably a very general sense of ease about the orchestra. You should have been privy to some of the rehearsals, because quite honestly, it's a very democratic process. Whereas Netta comes across as being the leader, he really isn't. It really is a group effort. That's the greatest energy of this ensemble. One of the greatest joys about it is that we all do take part in the process of deciding how phrases are made. And sometimes Netta says, well, maybe next time, next time we perform this, we'll do it that way. So that's why I said, did you bring a checkbook? Because there's some phrases we like to play differently. So it's really quite unique. You get to see the final product, but we get the joy of the rehearsals and deciding, whether, we play certain things. Any more questions?
There were, how many rehearsals? There was
3 rehearsals, 2.5 hours each, 15-minute break. So 2 hours and 15 minutes for 10 pieces, 9 pieces. 9 pieces. It was busy, very intense. Very intense. So we'll take one more question and then we'll meet you at the reception.
yes.
Back. Yes. Somebody. Right there.
Flutes and Mozart. What was this other time I hear about flutes?
As a solo, I mean, he wrote a lot of beautiful music for flutes. I think the distinction is more, as a solo instrument, it's a little limited in some ways. I mean, it's just, I think, that's what he seems to have thought. And as a composer myself, there's this, I think that's what it was. He wrote wonderful. I mean,
Like perfect pitch.
yeah, but I mean, his piano concertos are a wonderful example of like the most wonderful flute writing for as an ensemble instrument, and he did a lot of that. But he seems to have not wanted to write a lot of solo flute pieces. No, I think he did. It's not as simple as that he didn't like them. He as a solo, for a lot of pieces in a row as a solo instrument, I can understand wanting to write a piece for.
It's not the old. It's not the old stuff. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. Over soon.
gotta be Mozart. It's gotta be cool.
Well, that's the fun, trying something.
Right. Right. Eureka. Yeah. Oh, yeah.